Okay, guys, we're going to do, this is going to be kind of a little bit different of a setup for these videos. There's going to be 4 different videos. This is the first one, and we're going to talk about how they calculate standard deviation. The second one is going to be how to use the computer to calculate standard deviation. And then the other one's going to be how we tackle what's called the 5-number summary or the box plot, stuff like that. So it'll be a little different just because there's different things that we got to do. So hang in there. Don't forget to take your notes, spread out the information on your page, and then that's your original notes. And then compare this to what the book says and what we do in class, and then kind of adjust your notes as you go and add things and ask questions and different things like that. So what we're going to talk about is standard deviation. So this is example 2 on page P25. Okay, this is on page P25. So real quick idea behind they give you this chart here, and so the idea is this. This is standard deviation. Standard deviation is the distance most things or most data points are away from the mean, or far from how far they are from the mean. So if we take this idea of a mean, we know the mean is in the center, right? And it's 84.2. Okay? So how they calculate standard deviation is they take your first x value, so this is the test score x value. They take the first x value and they say, oh, it's right here. It's 85. Okay? It's 85, so then they take x1, the first x value, they subtract it from the mean. That's why it's x minus x bar. Oh, by the way, mean is donated by x bar. There's a bar above the x. So this means the mean. That's the symbol for mean. So the average for the class is 84.2, and then they take 85, which is our x1, and they subtract it from 84.2, and they get 0.8, and then they square it. And then they take their second one, which is 76, and it's going to be over here. It's quite a little bit lower. It's 76, and then you take, this is x2, this is x2. They take x2, x minus x bar, which they get negative 8.2, and then they square it. And then they keep doing that for all of the data points. So if you notice, there's 5 test scores. This is x1, this is x2, this is x3, this is x4, this is x5. So they calculate it by taking each one of these, subtracting the mean, squaring that value. Then they add them all up, and this is what's called, so the sum means they add them. They add them. So they add all these squared values up, and they get 160.8, and that's equal to the variance, okay? Now, the variance is like how variable these data points are. So if we look at this is x3 is over here, it's 92, this is x3, and 88 is right here, this is x4, this is 88, and then the last one is 80, which is going to be right about here, and this is x5. Okay, so we've got our mean, which is x bar, right here in the middle, and then we've got our data points all over the place. How far away they are from the mean, we subtracted it, we got it, we squared it, squared it, squared it, squared it, squared it. We get this thing called variance, which talks about how all over the place things are. And then from there, they calculate one more piece, which is called the standard deviation. So they take the sum, 160.8, they take the sample size, don't forget, this is sample size, They take the sample size, which is 5, remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they subtract 1. They do a little bit of math and they take the square root of that. And in the book it shows 6.3. Okay? So this shows 6.3 on the 6.3 standard deviation. Standard deviation is 6.3 units. Okay? Or this is actually points right now because it's tests. So they go through all these calculations here like this. They do all this math. They plug it into this equation. They subtract 1 from the sample size. They divide it. Then they take the square root. And they finally get a number that we really want, which is the standard deviation. Okay? These two pieces are the most important pieces that you need. This is how they do it by hand. We're not going to do them by hand, guys, so don't panic. We're going to do them using the calculator, but I wanted you guys to see how they calculate all this stuff. Okay? We need to understand how standard deviation relates to the mean. So if you notice, these data points are all over the place. What standard deviation tells us is that on average, the test scores are going to be 6.3 points to the right and 6.3 points to the left. Okay? So how do we interpret that? In other words, how are we going to say it? So our idea, so basically standard deviation measures variability. Variability means to deviate from something, or deviation. So the standard deviation is what is the unit, or how many units do these test scores deviate from the mean. So what we really say is on average the class test scores are 6.3 points above or below the mean test score of 84.2 points. Okay? So that's what we're looking for. Well, what are we saying with the sentence? On average, the class test scores are 6.3 points above or below the mean test score of 84.2 points. In other words, if I have a mean of 84.2, on average, it's going to be negative 6.3 points to the left and 6.3 points to the right. That's what we're saying. So a normal score is going to be in between those 2 points. That's what standard deviation means. It measures variability. They get it by calculating how far away all these points are from the mean. They do a bunch of math. They square it, they add it up. That's your variance. You take the variance, divide it by the sample size minus 1. You end up with an answer inside the square root. You take the square root of that, it gives you 6.3. If you were going to do them all by hand. Very rarely do we do them by hand. So in class and on a video, I'm going to show you a website that you use to calculate standard deviation. So the big important pieces are this. You need to understand what standard deviation means. You need to understand the symbol for standard deviation. And you need to be able to find it using your computer or a calculator, okay? So that's kind of where we're headed, but this is how you find them and what they mean. Standard deviation means how many points to the left or to the right on average of the mean that it is. All right, guys, good luck. This is a little touchy subject. We'll get part 2 up here soon.